So this set of slides is going through the DES algorithm. That's the Data Encryption Standard algorithm. It's one of the early modern approaches to encryption. And I'm not going to be able to go through it in as much detail as I would like. It's definitely covered in more detail in the textbook. I think you could actually implement the entire algorithm based on everything in the textbook. My goal here really is to give you a sense of how it works from a very high level. So in general, with these kinds of algorithms, there are many rounds or cycles that you will have to go through before you actually arrive at the final encrypted version of things. And so what will end up basically being done is just 16 cycles of taking one half of the data, doing some substitution and permutation to that data, and then swapping it with the next half of the data. Okay, so you kind of see that here in this picture. We have the left half of the data that's kind of just going down here, being permuted with this additional shifted stuff and creating the new right half, and then the right half of the data gets expanded a little bit, and then it becomes the new left half of the data. So that's really all that's happening over many rounds. Okay, so let's look at the first cycle. So you have that initial input, okay, whatever the message chunk is, because this is a block cipher. You take the message, the complete message, and break it up into different blocks. And in DES, we're talking about 64-bit blocks. So there will be two blocks, pardon me. Let's go back just to this. There we go. There will be two halves in that one 64-bit block. There we go. And then you'll do this 16 times. So you have cycle 1, cycle 2, and then cycle 16 is going to look basically different. So the startup cycle, the middle cycles, and this is true for all of the 2 through 15, and then the final cycle that produces the final output of that particular block. So cycle 1, the startup cycle. We have our input, a 64-bit block. We do our initial permutation. So you can think of the permutation as as earlier when we were talking about this sort of thing, we were talking about transposition. You can think of a permutation as basically the same thing as a transposition. So yeah, here we are. This is our initial transmutation, permutation. And then we create a left half and a right half. The right half goes to two places. First, it goes to the substitution location where we have the key, and of course this is also provided as an input. You can kind of think of the key as being provided by the user. The key gets shifted and also permuted for this cycle, and then we have the substitution based on that key, another permutation based on that, and then we XOR it with the left half. So the right half goes all the way over and becomes the left half, and then the original left half gets XORed with this permuted version of the right half. And then the key gets shifted again before you move on to the next cycle. So for the middle cycles, 2 through 15, the input is threefold now. You've got the left half and the right half, both of which are coming from the previous stage, and then the key that's been shifted from the previous stage. And essentially we're just doing the same thing, where we take the left half and XOR it with all of this gobbledygook. We take the right half and it becomes the new left half, right? And this gobbledygook here is basically the same thing that you saw at the very beginning. The only real difference is the key has been shifted from the original key that was provided, right? And we keep doing that for 15 cycles until we get to the last cycle. And this is where we're actually trying to produce an output. And so we have that initial permutation inverted after you've gone through one last round of doing the same stuff we saw before. And that produces the final output. This is a 64-bit block of stuff. And that will produce that'll essentially be the final output for DES. Now, this is not triple DES. This is a single application of DES. You may have heard of triple DES. And if you've read the textbook, you've certainly heard of it because it's mentioned there. Because it's actually sort of still possible to use triple DES, depending on the security mechanisms that you're interested in, but more than likely you don't really want to do that. I think you'd be much better off with AES. It's just a more secure standard. Okay, so this is very much the case for every block cipher. You'll have a single cycle that starts things off. You'll have middle cycles that continue the chain until you end up getting to the level of security that you're interested in, then a final cycle that wraps it all up and produces a final output block. Very, very common algorithm for block ciphers.